Hello, readers. It's Elle Casey doing another very, very late night reader question interview. I asked readers to submit on Facebook questions they wanted answered, and I got several responses, so I'm going to go ahead and answer those while we listen to Oasis singing Wonderwall and many other artists that who I like. Okay, so we'll start with Terry Nicker. No, Terry Kinker. I love that last name. She asked, what did it feel like to quit your job to pursue writing full time? I want to know that feeling someday. Well, it was a combination of excitement and fear. I was working for, I don't know, about 2 years, almost 3 years, part-time at teaching at a university 2 or 3 days a week. And then I was writing all the other days of the week. I didn't take any days off. And I've worked, I don't know, a full-time job since I was 17 years old. So it's the first time I've ever done something, I don't know, that feels like I have no completely solid foundation under my feet. So it was scary for that reason, but exciting because I'm really glad to be able to dedicate myself full-time to the writing because it's what I'm really most passionate about. I will miss my students, but I will not miss the traveling that I had to do in order to get to my teaching job. Kristen Boyd says, why do you write under a pen name? Well, first of all, because my real name is hard to pronounce, which is a silly reason, but no one ever pronounces my first name properly, and I don't know, it just seemed like it might be a barrier to somebody wanting to read my book if they couldn't even read my name, but also because in my previous life I was a lawyer and I had a lot of legal clients and so on, and I just didn't want the two lives to mix up. Now, later on, I don't know, I've been writing for 1.5 years now, I would say that maybe I'd be okay with using my real name, but actually I think my pen name is prettier than my real name, so maybe I wouldn't, I don't know. But my pen name is actually somewhat related to my real name, but if I told you how, then you'd probably guess my real name, so I won't tell you that. Kirsten Williams says, what does it feel like when you come up with an idea for a new book? Do you jump up from whatever you're doing to write it down, or do you keep it all in your head? Well, maybe 15 years ago I would have kept it in my head, but now that my head is 44 years old and it's full of holes like Swiss cheese, I don't try to keep anything in there because it just falls right out and, I don't know, it lands on the street next to me or something for someone to pick up. So I write things down on pieces of paper and then try to quickly put it into a computer file, or probably my most my most effective source of remembering things is to nudge my husband in the middle of the night and tell him to remind me in the morning. Because sometimes as I'm drifting off to sleep, when I'm in that half asleep, half awake stage, that's when my mind can relax enough to kind of noodle through ideas. I come up with things at that point, and I am too tired to roll over and write it down, so I nudge him on the shoulder and say, hey, I have this idea and blah, blah, blah. Remind me to tell you in the morning, or remind me to write it down tomorrow morning. And he will wake up in the morning and say, I think I'm supposed to remind you of something. And then I say, well, what was it? Because I have absolutely no recollection. And he'll say, something about Las Vegas. And then, boom, I remember what it was. So he's very effective for remembering things. And then I also have my iCal calendar on my Mac. Zachary Nichols says, how does the feeling you get when a series is finished compared to reaching the end of a school year and watching a group of students move up to the next level? Well, that's strange because I don't really see any correlation at all, only because at the university level where I teach, I was teaching, at the beginning I was teaching master's level students who were just part of a very short program to begin with, and then they would leave and do any number of different things, travel or do an internship or whatever. So they moved on to their adult lives. And I kept in touch with a few of them, but for the most part, it was just, kind of another day in the life of being a teacher. My recent teaching was with younger students who were in their first year of university. And because I knew I wasn't coming back for the next year and I knew I wouldn't see them again, it was just kind of they're all good kids, and I know they're all going to have really bright futures, and I felt really positive about what all of them are doing. So it was just kind of like, I was happy to help them through that year happy to know that they were moving on with big plans. But the two never really crossed over, so I didn't really see much of a comparison really between those two things. I really had two separate lives. I had a life of a teacher and a life of a writer, and they really did not mingle at all. Gary Wilson says, when will Jane, Spike, and Tim be back? And for those of you who haven't yet read War of the Fae or Clash of the Other Worlds, those are some big characters in that particular, those two series that are related to each other. And I don't know when they'll be back, but I sure do miss them, so I'd like to think they will be back. I don't have my plans set for 2014 yet, but it's been in the back of my mind that Jane, as a dragon rider now, has some other stories to tell, and certainly Tim is very busy. So, and his son Willie, I'm sure, very busy getting into trouble. So I don't know, but I would like to think they're going to come back, possibly in 2014. We'll see. Natalie Hamidi said, do the rump dance for us. And really, I had some mojitos tonight with some friends, but I didn't have enough mojitos tonight to do the rump dance. So you'll have to just wait on that. But perhaps we can schedule a rump dance for the future, because everyone should do a really good rump dance once in a while. It gets the serotonin levels up, right? Jamie Pinson says, if a genie granted you one wish and you could have anything you wanted except for more wishes, what would you wish for? And, well, other than peace and prosperity for the entire world, which I don't know if that should even be on the list. I don't know if I could get a wish that big. But if I was going to be completely selfish and I wanted to do something entirely for myself, I would say that I would like to be a New York Times bestselling author. That's the brass ring for me. That's what I'm shooting for, and that's what I dream about every day, and that's, to me, the ultimate, I don't know, it's the ultimate recognition that I write books that a lot of people want to read. That's it. Teresa Vera, I know you're a pantser, which means that I don't outline my stories before I write them. I just fly by the seat of my pants. But how much story development do you do before you start writing? Just a character, a basic plot, world building, secondary characters, opening scene, a couple scenes? Okay, Teresa, that's like, I don't know, 8 questions. But I'm happy to answer all of them for you because you are my superstar beta reader. Teresa is the bombardier. She's amazing. She can read a book in less than 24 hours, highlight it, and send me back corrections all less than 24 hours. And she's always available to me, even though she's got little kids and a life and all kinds of things going on. So if I was wearing a hat right now, I'd tip it at you, Teresa. So let me just answer these questions instead. How much story development do I do? I have usually just an idea that gets sparked by something maybe during the day, or maybe a news story that I read, or a memory that I have of something, or a person I know, just anything. It could happen anywhere, but mostly it starts with a basic fact and then me saying, well, what if this were to happen? And then what if this happened? And what if this happened? And then it creates kind of a basic story idea. And sometimes I will sit down and just write a paragraph or two just so that I don't forget the idea. And I basically have a beginning, middle, and end. Just, I would say like a Wikipedia summary of a story. And so I write that down in 1, 2, or 3 paragraphs. And then just having that piece gives me the main characters. So I always start with main characters and I put them in a scene. The first main character I'll put, usually it's female perspective. I've only started with a male perspective one time in one book. So I'll put her in a situation, and knowing already what her personality is like and what she looks like and what her attitude is, because I've kind of thought what kind of person would be in this scenario, what kind of person would be in a story like this, what kind of person would end up that way. I already know who she is to some degree. So I put her in that scenario, and then I just follow her guidance. I really don't, if I try to push characters in a certain way, it always rings false. So I just kind of let the character lead. And 9 times out of 10, maybe I should say 10 times out of 10, what I wrote in the beginning, those beginning outline paragraphs, never resemble the final product. Because as characters pop onto scenes, people I do not plan for, people who just appear out of like a knocks at the door, And I'm, as the writer, sitting there going, I wonder who's behind that door. And the main character opens the door, and suddenly this person introduces himself or herself to not only the main character, but me. So I don't know where they come from. I really don't know where they come from. Like, for example, Tim the Pixie in War of the Fae. When Jane walked into that room and saw something on the desk, I had no idea what was on the desk until she got closer and took a look and saw this bell jar. And then I had no idea what was in the bell jar until she saw what was in the bell jar. So it sounds ridiculous, but that's really how it works for me. And I've heard other authors give interviews, and some of them say the same thing. So if I'm crazy, I'm part of a group of crazy people. So I feel a little better about my insanity for that reason. But anyway, I start out with some ideas about where I think it should go. I start out with a main character or two, and then I just follow their lead. And they always lead me into entertaining, interesting, and funny places. And maybe that's why many readers say that my books have twists and turns they weren't expecting, because I don't expect them either. Just the characters do things unexpected because I don't have expectations. I just let them organically continue on with their story, experience things, experience challenges, and handle them as best they can with whatever tools they have at their disposal, and then live with the outcome and try to manage the outcome. So that was a really long answer to only part of her question. So world building. I think my biggest... Well, War of the Fae had a lot of world building, and so did Apocalypsis. War of the Fae was more difficult because it was a new world, a complete fantasy world, and a world built of nothing except imagination. And it just kind of created itself as I went through the story. But Apocalypsis was a post-apocalyptic world in Florida where I lived a lot of years. So I'm familiar with the area, and I've been to the Everglades. And so I knew in my mind what it might look like if, civilization kind of ceased to exist. So the world building there was not necessarily the physical world, but it was the emotional world of the people who were left behind. And that was just, in my mind, what I expected would happen, if all the adults disappeared and children were left to fend for themselves, which is a concept and a topic or a theme that I've been thinking about and considering since I was a very little girl. It's always fascinated me. So I've probably spent, 35 or close to 40 years imagining, what if I was a kid and all the grown-ups disappeared? What would I do? And as I've gotten older, my answers have refined themselves or changed. So it's a series I had to write because it's just been an obsessive thought in my mind for most of my life. So it was very cathartic, really, getting it out there on paper. Secondary characters. Secondary characters just come on the scene completely unexpected and unplanned. And I don't think I've ever, other than in War of the Fae, there's a somewhat secondary character, Tony, Jane's best friend. He was meant to be there from the beginning because he's based on a friend of mine from high school. So he in my mind, was patterned after a real person, a very important real person. So he's really the only side character, though, that was planned. All the other ones just kind of appear out of nowhere. Like when Jane goes with Tony to Miami and then goes with Jared into that warehouse, I had no idea as I was typing the words out who was going to be in the warehouse. It could have been nobody. It could have been one person. I don't know. But as I looked at the scene through Jane's eyes, I saw more people there than I was originally expecting. So I just basically wrote what she saw. I'm really worried about myself now. I'm wondering if I have a split personality. But anyway, that's how it worked. Doesn't make much sense, but that's how it worked. Opening scene or couple scenes? Well, that depends. Like opening scene for War of the Fae was an actual opening scene of my life in high school. I specifically remember the exact day and where I was sitting in the desk that I was in and the thoughts I was having. So that one was easy for me. Jane's personality is very much based on my inner struggles as a teenager in high school. So Jane was easy for me. Bryn was more difficult for me because she's very different from me personally. I don't know anyone like her. And, she was in an end of the world scenario. And so The house that she lives in and the neighborhood that she lives in is patterned after a neighborhood that I lived in Maitland, Florida. So that made it easier for me to kind of build that world there and picture the houses and picture what was happening, because I just pictured my own yard and my own house and my own neighborhood. But the opening scenario was for me just the natural beginning. You know, if I'm going to tell you this tale of life after a post-apocalyptic virus has wiped out the adults, where am I going to start? I didn't feel starting at the beginning of the virus problem was where I wanted to start the story. That was not the relevant part. And that's something that some readers have complained about in reviews. They want to know what happened to the adults. And my response, if anyone would want to know my response, I don't necessarily tell anybody this, but my response to that is it's not relevant. It doesn't matter whether it was a virus or a nuclear bomb or an engineered tomato or whatever it was. What matters is the kids are left behind and they have to try to find a way to survive and start new communities and piece together what's left. However, if you're a fan of the Apocalypse series, I will tell you that I am strongly considering doing an offshoot series that will start, its opening scene will start prior to the virus wiping all the adults out. And it will feature Kirsten, who was head of the female Amazon-type girls who Bodo was with for a period of time. And it will tell the story through Kirsten's perspective. And then we'll finish after the time period that the Apocalypse series finished. So you will see before the Apocalypse series and you will see after the Apocalypse series, because so many people are curious what happened to Bodo and what happened to Kirsten and what happened to a couple other people. So this, if I do this offshoot series, which I haven't committed to doing, but if I do, it will cover those issues and will answer a lot of the questions that I see in reviews. And that's one thing that I want to bring up that's not in a reader question, but that is reader reviews. Well, I have, I don't know, said it umpteen times on my blog and other places that reader reviews are my drugs, but I will also say that they are almost like the little angel and the little devil sitting on my shoulder giving me advice. You know, not every review that's a low star review is meant to just vent emotional angst about something or to be critical. Sometimes it's just there to help me improve my writing. And so I pick out the things from lower star reviews to help me improve. And when I see things in high star reviews where people are really happy with the way certain things are going, I think that is a thing that I'm doing right. So I think reviews help me refine my skill at the craft of writing. They also help me refine the understanding of what readers want and what makes readers feel satisfied. That, like, the reader experience, which kind of sounds like businessy, but the reader experience is very important to me. So I read a lot about what people liked and what they're still wondering about and what they wish they had some closure on. And so I would like to be able to provide that in another series if I have time to do it and the freedom to do that. So hopefully I'll do that next year, and I hope it'll be well received. She also asked about a couple scenes. What happens sometimes, and this happened in Duality recently, that I'm sitting there falling asleep. It's usually the twilight sleep as I'm falling asleep for the night, because during the day my brain is going in 20 different directions. I have a very hard time focusing on a single thing at once. I don't know if it's a medical problem or a mental problem or what, but there's only a couple times that I can actually only focus on one thing at a time, and that's when I'm taking a walk and talking to somebody. I can only think about that one thing I'm talking about. And as I'm falling asleep and my mind kind of wanders into no man's land, it follows these weird trails that normally I'm too busy to follow. So that's why when I need to work through an issue with one of my books, I will take a walk with my husband and just talk to him about my book. That helps me noodle things through. And when I'm laying there in bed and wandering through no man's land, sometimes it'll spark an idea that I never considered, and it's really good. So I will nudge my husband, give him the outline, and then he reminds me in the morning, and I quickly get up and I go into my writing software, which is called Scrivener. And if it's an idea for a whole new book, I will open up a new project and I will just type in a paragraph to remind me what the idea is. If it's my current work in progress, like it was with Duality, I will quickly write out a scene, and then I stick the scene kind of just off to the side. And then I think of a way that I might fit it into the book. So there are 2 scenes in Duality 2, that were these twilight sleep sparks of inspiration. And I'm not going to say in this interview which 2 scenes they are. Maybe I'll hold a contest. I think that's what I'll do. Yes, I love contests. I will do a contest to see if you can guess what 2 scenes they are. And I will give maybe an Amazon gift certificate, or maybe like even something cool like a signed book or a Kindle or something to the winners. There'll be more than one winner, because I like when more than one person wins stuff. So yeah, I'll do that. So for other scenes other than an opening scene, sometimes I just come up with a scene that I try to fit in because I just really like it. I think it highlights character situations or develops a character more. It's just something fun that I want to make sure to include. So that happened in Duality 2 recently. All right, moving on to Stephanie Clifton. Will you write stories about other groups in the apocalyptic world? Okay, I already answered that one. Woohoo! 2 birds with 1 stone. She also says, oh, and regarding the pen name comment, I expect it's because Elle is afraid we will stalk her more than we already do. I like being stalked. Well, in the friendly reader, I love your books way, not in the crazy, I want to trap you in my house and tie you to bed way, like happened in Misery. So, yeah, I like the happy stalking and not so much the crazy stalking. Let's see. Jess McGuire. Jamie, that's easy. Elle would wish to write forever, or a dragon, always a dragon. Oh, okay, so Jamie asked me if I could have one wish, what would I wish for? And she says I would wish for a dragon, but it would have to be a very specific dragon because I have a kind of small house, and if I had a regular-sized dragon in here, it would become very uncomfortable for everyone, and probably we'd suffer some 2nd or 3rd degree burns, which would suck. If it was a teeny tiny dragon, then I don't know if I'd want it because I'd want to ride it, and I couldn't ride a teeny tiny dragon, so the dragon thing, I'm not sure. It would have to be a very special, very specific dragon. Jess McGuire says, say I wanted to dress as Jane for Supernova, Oz's Comic-Con. I'd need a cool green cloak and Blackie. My question is, how does Blackie look in your head, and what else would be standout Jane clothing? Well, you know that Jane wears jeans, and she wears a white tunic shirt. So you would definitely need to be wearing that. And Blackie looks to me about, okay, now I'm American, so I use American measurements, but if you're on the metric system, you need to do your conversions, because even though I've lived in France for 3 years, I still suck at metrics. So you can't see anything I'm doing now, can you? I would say it's like a spike that's about 18 inches long and this big around at the root, which looks like, I don't know, what is that, 3 or 4 inches? And then going down to a more narrow, this looks maybe a little perverted. Sorry, I should stop that. Going down narrower to the other end, right? And sharp. But I pictured it like straight. I didn't picture it curved like a fang normally would be. So, you know, but you can do whatever you want, because I encourage readers to use their own imagination and spread their creative wings. Samantha Roy asked me the most difficult question of the night. Which of your series is your favorite? That's like asking me which one of my children is my favorite. Now, when my children ask me that question, I always tell the child who's asking me that that child is my favorite. Because if they care enough to know, then they are my favorite. And my children will regularly hold competitions to be the favorite child, and will work harder at being a good child to be my favorite child. So I think it works for everyone. Regarding which series is my favorite, I couldn't say. I like them all for different reasons. They're all important to me for different reasons. War the Fae is important because so much of what Jane goes through emotionally, dealing with who she is and battling being socially awkward and socially even repugnant sometimes, I guess, to some people. Certainly people who give some of me reviews sometimes find her repugnant. That is based a lot on how I felt as a teenager. So it was very important to me to create a character that reflected so much of me, and then to have so many people love her and appreciate her despite her flaws. It was almost for me like a type of therapy to put the ugliest parts of myself out there and then have people come back and say, well, you know what, there may be some ugly parts, but the awesome parts were so awesome it didn't matter about the ugly parts. Or for them to say, I thought the ugly parts were awesome too. So that's what, and I'm a fantasy fan. Like, I'm a huge fantasy fan. I've been reading the fantasy genre since I was really young. Like Hobbit. The Hobbit was one of the first books I read. I was less than 10 years old when I read that book. So, I mean, fantasy is one of my favorite genres, and Jane is based on me a lot, so I would say it's important for that reason. Apocalypse is important to me because I think I always felt like I could do better with my life if there weren't adults in it when I was younger. Like, I really wanted to be on my own, and I always felt like I knew better than they did what I needed, and so I was always fascinated by independence, and I wanted to be independent. I'm a very independent person, so I think that series gives me hope. Like, I think if my entire world crumbled around me and it didn't have structure anymore, and everything that used to be wasn't anymore, that I could still find a way to survive just like these kids did. So, the themes of fighting for what's right and sticking up for your values and what you think is right, and for sticking up for people who can't stick up for themselves, that series does that for me. So I've said before that I don't write things with themes on purpose, that I don't write to teach lessons or to express my morality or whatever. I write to entertain, but obviously things I think or believe come through in the writing in places. And so I guess the theme of hope when there is no more hope is important to me. So that's why I love Apocalypse. Wrecked was my first book. And that's the main reason why that book is so important to me. And the idea of being stuck on a deserted island is something I've always wondered about too. It's again in the theme of kids surviving without adults. That's obviously, if you've read my books, you know that that's the main theme in most of my books. And duality is something new for me, where I mixed more of a romantic element into the paranormal world. And I love the idea that there are just people out there who you're either attracted to or repelled by, and you can't quite put your finger on why. And there are certain people, like, I don't know, I'll just pick one out of the blue, like Bill Clinton or Barack Obama, very charismatic people that you are drawn to. Not everybody loves those people, but even most people can agree that sometimes they say things that are very compelling and make you stop and think. And you wonder, why are some people so charismatic and so magnetic, and other people, you look at them and they just give you the heebie-jeebies and you don't want to be around them, and it's not something they're doing outwardly. So I considered that, what if, so it always starts my ideas, I think, what if there really is something that could explain this magnetism or this repelling? So that's where that one kind of started, and I like the idea of there being an opposite. And I looked it up after I started thinking about the concept. I looked it up on Wikipedia and other places about the concept of duality, about how for one end of the spectrum, there's always an opposite end of the spectrum that balances everything out and creates harmony. There's harmony in the universe because there's always something that's the opposite. And I think that idea was explored in the movie Unbreakable. I think it was called Unbreakable, or maybe it was called Breakable, but it had Bruce Willis in it and Samuel L. Jackson. It was a really freaky movie. I really loved it. That the idea that there's a totally fallible, delicate human being, and so his idea is, if I exist, then there must be the total opposite, a superhero, someone who can't be destroyed. So anyway, it's kind of the same concept. And I find myself more and more drawn to writing romance. Most of my earlier books pretty much avoided the romantic element, or it was a very secondary element to the story. But now I've been a romance reader since I was 9 years old. Believe it or not, my grandma let me read her Harlequins, and my parents didn't care as long as I was reading something. So I read lots of sexy books as I was growing up, and I don't know how many hundreds of romances I've read by big names and indies alike. So I love the genre, and I want to be more involved in it. And so that's why this summer I'm writing 3 romances. They are with characters in their 20s, so they're not YA, like young adult. They're NA, which is new adult, so they're meant for older readers. And they will have more sexual situations, definitely some explicit sexual situations, so they're not meant for younger readers. But I'm excited about spreading my wings and trying some new stuff and writing in a genre that I've really enjoyed as a reader. So anyway, that's the end of all the questions. And the mojitos that I drank an hour or so ago have pretty much completely worn off, so it's time for me to go to bed. It is 1:38 in the morning my time. So I hope you guys are having a great weekend, and I will do another one of these videos next month probably. So if you've got a really good question, just put it on my Facebook, and I will, or just keep an eye out. I'll put a little note on there that I'm looking for questions. So it was nice talking at you. Maybe someday we'll figure out a way to make this two-way. And okay, until next time, a bientôt.